Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Eric Rosen, and welcome to your Viking Rising weekly energy update for May 8th through May 14th, 2022. Thanks for being here. Wow, I started to tune into the energy of what's coming this week, and it's lit. It's exciting. I didn't really know what to expect because the energy right now can feel a little bit in the doldrums depending on like where you're at, or you could be feeling like you're living your best life. It's kind of like the diving board a little bit, like that spring action. It's like, are you on the up and up, like about to dive into the water, or do you feel like you're already kind of swimming underwater and you've got to find a way to get back up on high ground again? So the good news is that this week is going to bring a sense of elated energy no matter what. It's going to put that pep in our step. The moment that we get out of the water, like we get out of like the soup of our emotions or feelings of, deep sensitivity or surrender or even loss, we can actually start to feel that spark, that heat again. It's like reminds me of being at the pool again, like the diving board. And it's like you swim out of the water, but then you get out on the concrete and the concrete's warm or even a little hot, and you're like excited because you're walking back up to like take another dive again. And that's a little bit what is kind of coming. I mean, we've got Jupiter coming into Aries as Mercury goes retrograde on the 10th. And so it's like, hello, fuck yeah, like 12 more years of like another Jupiter cycle around the zodiac. It's finishing now. And so Mercury in Gemini, which is like the opposite of like the home that Jupiter likes to be in, which is Sagittarius. Jupiter's like wants to deal with like the big things. So coming into Aries, it's dealing with the big re-identification of your identity. This Mercury going retrograde, though, is like trying to understand like some of like the details of like how that's going to look. And it's kind of impossible to grasp on a mental level. It's going to come as more of an embodiment. And so it's letting the spark coalesce with your energy, even if it just starts off as just a little flicker at first, and letting it move through your body, move through your DNA. Like, don't fight the feeling or try to like understand how to like take action with it, because that's part of the understanding sometimes with Chiron and Aries, is that a lot of times when we do like get our strength back, we want to like immediately like take action on it. And Chiron's like kind of teaching us like, hey, like remember, we're all just a little bit wounded, and that if you try to like push like too hard, too heavy, too fast before you understand with Jupiter coming here what the bigger story is, then maybe you end up, sort of not paying attention and kind of like writing off the page a little bit. Imagine that you're writing your story in your book, but then you look this way and then your hand goes off the page, and then you're making marks on the floor or the wall or whatever, and then no one can really understand it except you, which is just like knowing within of like that Chiron wound of like your own personal identity, who am I kind of like mess. So if you like want people to understand it, which I think that's the best thing that's coming about all this, it's like not only the reemergence of like more of a trumpet call understanding the story of who we are, but also being able to like articulate that story to others. It's also a really important time, I think, with you still got Taurus season, Uranus, North Node there. So it's like the feminine is ruling the roost. I mean, Saturn's kind of like really ruling the roost because Uranus doesn't like to be in Taurus. And so it's like we still have to have responsibility and integrity, but it's like the responsibility and the integrity, I think, comes from letting the feminine energy lead a little bit. And so that's why it's like if we try to push the action like too hard, too fast with this Aries energy, with Jupiter coming there with Chiron, it's going to kind of be a little bit like coming too fast with South Node and Scorpio, of like trying to like burn things out, trying to penetrate life and push it too hard. So I'll be real. Like I think the first, significant part of this week, first 6 days, is just going to be getting our own internal understanding, which, that's typical, especially when you have like, a planet that's not more of a personal planet like Mars, Venus, Mercury come into a new sign. At first, when it comes into that new sign, it's kind of in the lobby. It's kind of like, looking around a little bit. It's like Jupiter might feel like it just like left a funeral home, and it's like looking around and going, wait, there's no names on like this, that thing where you like write your name down, like when you visited at the funeral, like for someone's funeral, and it's like they're blank, and it's like that transition period of being like, wait, like all of a sudden you realize you're not at a funeral parlor at all. You're actually just like in the lobby of like your own grand entrance. And so this is going to look differently for everybody. I'm getting insights of like what it might look like for me, but just imagine that it might feel kind of like weird at first, and like a little bit like creepy. And it's like you got to kind of remember to go outside and explore, and go outside of your understanding of like how you identify. Because I mean, the truth is that the reason Aries comes first is because we're searching for identity at first, and we form a lot of our identity stuff from probably around the age of like 6 to 17ish, of this understanding of our ego developing, of like who we are. And so we've got to kind of step out of like the conditioning of like whatever we were brought up on, and be like, okay, it's not the same story from 12 years ago. It's more just like, remember to like read the back of the book that was written so you get an understanding what the story was. But it's like, oh wait, I already know this book. I'm just like reading the back to know what it was about. I don't have to go relive all the facts of it with Mercury going retrograde in Gemini. It's more like, let me do a review period for the last 90 days since Mercury last went retrograde, and to not like get hung up on like trying to understand like crazy details about like our self-worth or like relationships or projects, especially like how the future is going to show up to that. Because in a lot of ways, that Jupiter can end up feeling like a lure with no fishing line attached to it, where we're subconsciously trying to fish for information in murky waters and old murky emotional waters. And so this is a lot of like, let the spark happen. Like let actions happen, but it's happening from like a playful place. It's happening from a place of, feeling the heat rising, and not trying to like force it or push it or try to like figure things out. And so it can feel kind of weird. Like, it's like kind of like a quiet week. Like if you're an observer at the pool and you're just like watching the kids like, jump off the diving board over and over again, it's kind of cool to watch. You're kind of smiling, but then, it's not like it's, a fucking NASCAR race or like a horse race or, something like that like Aries energy kind of likes to have. But that's, I think, the important element of all this with North Node and Taurus and coming into this Aries energy. I can't help but describe the fact that these are the first two signs of the zodiac. These are youthful energies. Pluto's retrograde at the end of Capricorn, and so it's like the older, more like decrepit energy is like kind of like getting dug up. It's like digging up like imagine like mutated dirt. I know it sounds weird, but like dirt that you can't even use, like dirt that you don't even want like on the graves of like anything from the past, where you're just like, we need like fresh dirt. Like we need like to walk on dirt, walk on the earth, like not with like this old energy. Because like if we keep interacting physically with old objects and things like that like remind us of our past or people or like whatever it is, it can kind of like bring up those wounds. And so it's like Jupiter in Aries is about the self, right? So it's not feeling like you've got to go out and like recreate the world right away with people either. And maybe Mercury, I mean, it's like we can't stop our life from like connecting with people and having conversations just because Mercury's retrograde. I mean, Uranus is in Taurus and wants to connect to the best people and disconnect from the ones that aren't helping us be our best, right? So it's like having those conversations. But I can't stress it enough, but I don't know why my guides keep saying it's like, don't force it. It's like a lot of Saturn, like kind of like the reminder of like hey, like remember how last year was crazy for the world and for some people personally if they tried to take on too much. And it's like kind of like this remembering of like, let the old wounds kind of like heal, let Jupiter, go through this sort of this cycle, this corridor transition out of Pisces, where it's had its cleansing, into Aries, where it's ready to come back out into the sun, and to not try to like rush through that and like carry a sense of like not feeling fully sanitized or fully clean, to adapt to this new environment, this new level of consciousness with Jupiter and Aries, and to be motivated by fear or fight or flight energy or adrenal stuff, because that's Aries energy of like adrenals and rest and taking lots of action, intense action, but also like you go too hard and then you burn yourself out. And it's like, if you're someone that burnt yourself out last year or felt for a poor story or something like that, it's like, yeah, really take the time to cleanse. If you're someone that like took the time to do the North Node Gemini thing that we had, which was like getting to know yourself better, I think this can be a really good time for Mercury coming through there and like looking at these areas and kind of like, like little mini environmental like celebrations of like the work that you've put in to your mind, and to like seeing that. But like wherever you're at, it's like seeing like how far your mind has like come and adapted, and to see that like you've like Jupiter leaving like Pisces and having the South Node that we've gotten a little bit used to in Scorpio since the 17th of January. It's like maybe we're finally getting to a place where like the dark isn't swaying us into our vices, our addictions, our like weird fucking mutated habits. Like there's a mutation to Chiron in Aries, and so Jupiter can almost be like, well, at least it's like the positive like mutation now of the self, of like maybe accepting and emerging as the self of the story of like, this is who I am, this is my story, write your fucking story, as opposed to like trying to hide the Chiron wound of the identity and doing the South Node Scorpio thing of like masquerading and being like, oh, like this is me, like I'm strong, like I'm all good. And it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe, who knows, like maybe this is the time where we don't force whatever stories about our wounded identity like need to come out to people, but it's just kind of like subconsciously allowing those things to emerge. It's letting the gifts come in of it, not like feeling like, well, okay, like there's no gifts, there's not a lot to hand out, so like I need to go like force and like create this experience, because these node placements of North Node Taurus, South Node Scorpio will bring up resources of like who has resources or who has money or who doesn't, how well you manifest it. I put out a thing about how there's like 4 camps of people that manifested well and they're okay with transformation and change, people that have manifested well in the past but they're afraid of the new changes and evolutions that human consciousness is going through, people that maybe didn't manifest the best or well at all and like feeling kind of victimized. And then there's the people that, I fall more into this category of like probably didn't manifest the best but learned a lot about myself and ready to take those great challenging lessons and an understanding of who I am and my astrology of like, okay, like what's the next change, what's the next transformation. It's like Pluto at the end of Capricorn, Uranus has been in Taurus for a while now. It's like if you're on the spiritual path, if you've listened to this video long enough, if you like you get this stuff, or you're just on a spiritual path at all, it's like don't bail out now. Like just like no matter like where the manifesting process is at, of like what resources you have or don't have, because it's not always about that. It's not always about like who ended up like with the most like physical things, because the truth is that while yes, there's an importance to connecting more in the physical reality of things and to manifest better and to take better responsibility, like it's just going to be like a Neptune left in Pisces wasteland, no longer with Jupiter there painting a rosy picture of like, of like regret, or the poison of regret of like, well, I didn't manifest well, or like going back and like looking like, oh, I could have made this decision 8 years ago, or this one 2 years ago, or like whatever. And it's like Neptune and Pisces will like keep us trapped in a fucking creepy, depressed loop, you know? Like, we don't have, Jupiter was causing a huge up and down, kind of like things are really good or things are fucking not good, up and down mental battle. But like now with just like Neptune there, it's going to be a little bit more of like this mutated like kind of like elements of like creepiness of like if you keep staying there, it's like it would be like watching the Will Smith slap with Chris Rock over and over again and like trying to figure out if it was real or not, and then like getting bored with it after 2 or 3 times of being detected with that, and then being like, what's up with the Johnny Depp fucking whatever her name is fucking case, and like looking at that stuff, like all like the illusionary Hollywood stuff, or like the illusion of the masculine feminine dilemma and choosing sides on like an external level, like that to me, and I'm going to end it with this, it's the greatest illusion of all, is that there's having to choose a side between masculine and feminine, whether that's how some people see that in 3D externally, like siding with someone like Johnny Depp or fucking his ex-girlfriend, or if you walk a spiritual path of like, yeah, go divine feminine, or like the men like fucking just maybe not woke and be a misogynist or whatever it is. Like either way, it's a reminder that Venus is in Aries now and Mars is in Pisces, and so Venus likes to be in Pisces, and so they're kind of like flipped the position they would like to be. Mars would like to be at home in Aries, so it's kind of like this understanding of like, hey, like these energies have to sort of like crisscross and like find themselves on the other side of the tracks a little bit, and that what we're bumping into is maybe some of just like our clashing thoughts and ideals, where our value systems are maybe different as men and women, or different values as masculine, different values as feminine, and that it's more about exploring and finding ourselves on the opposite side of this energy of maybe what you're not used to identifying with. So like if you're a man and you're strong and you're masculine, going across the other way to the feminine. If you're a woman, it's like learning to heal out of the masculine with Chiron and Aries, and everyone's healing the masculine, Chiron and Aries and Jupiter there. And so that, I think, is going to be like the introduction or the acknowledgement on this new Jupiter story, is actually going to be like the premise for the next year, which is, having had a Venus retrograde in Capricorn, and having Chiron in Aries, and just like gonna have a fucking, this is what it is too. It's like Mars is gonna retrograde in Gemini, and so with Mercury retrograde, it's almost like this introduction chapter, this acknowledgement to see what the story is going to be collectively for everybody, and then their own individual chapter. It's kind of like astrology is going to be, hey guys, like you're exploring the opposite energy that you feel the most comfortable with, masculine and feminine, and that by doing that, the masculine feminine combination is how we know divinity, it's how we know God, it's how we activate God essence and self. Like they even talk about this with the quote-unquote twin flame journey, as being like the coveted holy grail of relationships, that it's an individual journey, that you're learning to embody the masculine and feminine traits within yourself, but using the relationship as a catalyst and even a trigger for that. So to me, that applies to all relationships, all issues in all relationships, is just when is the masculine feminine dance sort of like getting a little bit too wobbly, and it's losing its grace, it's losing its compassion, or so like the dancers are like, I see it clearly, like fucking they're doing the salsa or the tango, and they're like, one of them gets pissed and throws a fucking shoe at the other person, and it's like, or the other person gets bored and goes and slams a fucking drink, like Neptune and Pisces, like escapism. So it's like you've got the Pisces escapism, you've got Jupiter Chiron Aries of like anger and frustration. So it's going to happen. It's going to happen to people. And I think that's part of like it, is like, how is everybody's story going to be different? How are they going to deal with this for the next year of this story of like the masculine feminine dance and the healing? Because that's like the new kind of like war front a little bit. And even within people, of gender re-identification in a way, I think, or just like trying to figure out just anyone that's like trying to figure out energies within themselves of masculine and feminine, however they express that. It's like, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. My guides want me to remind everybody of that it doesn't matter, like, if you express it outwardly or not, or whatever it is, that this is going to be the big story. It's like, where is this all going? And you're going to have Jupiter retrograde back into Pisces in December towards the end of the year. So it's like, we're not done with all this Pisces energy. And so it might be feeling like there's some writer's block to the understanding of our identity and where the story is going, but maybe more intentionally, if you're willing to like do the healing work, to make it a planned break from writing the story, as opposed to like forcing writer's block. I love you all so much. I know this was a deep one and went even a little bit past a week's timeline chronologically, but just understanding that like Jupiter entering into Aries, it's a big deal. Jupiter takes about a year to go through every zodiac sign, one year for each zodiac sign, all 12 signs. So I think I pretty much covered all the planets, like what's going on with them. At the end of the day, though, it's remembering that the final send-off that I want to say is this. It's like, for me as a Capricorn, just with Pisces being the house of messages and speaking and perspective, is as Jupiter's leaving here, it's unconditional love. And that's always the truth. That's always been the story. But this could be a time where if we get too hung up in making the facts of what has happened or what is happening like good or bad, we can start to mess with the transition period, like going into Aries, to where it makes it more uncomfortable than it needs to be, and that maybe we don't enjoy the journey as much of this transition, this re-identification, because we're too busy and distracted by our own stories or our own mental constructs to experience the beauty of that warm spark that I talked about coming back. That really we've never seen before, with a lot of the way the planets are placed. And it's like, last time we would have saw the spark in this way would have been, man, I don't even know if we had a Jupiter meet with Chiron in Aries. I'd have to go back and look at that. But if we did, that would have been back in the 70s. And so, maybe this is like where we get a little bit of that Saturday night fever again, a little bit of like Boogie Nights action in ourselves, but more in just like the modern way of knowing that things don't maybe seem as fun as like they could be, because of like where life is at, and like collectively, and just as we're all trying to figure out this building process. And Jupiter coming into Aries can be a little bit of like the weirdness, like the real weirdness of like how more war headlines like start to come out, a little bit, like in really fucked up like ways, like that are just strange. And so, but that's why it's like letting that spark come to us internally and not try to force a story forward, because there's going to be false stories still being told out in the world. And the last thing we want to do is get into our own minds connected to this collective consciousness and start telling ourselves our own false story through ego and force about where things are going and what we need to do, because we're being like impatient for this transition. And Pluto at the end of Capricorn is going to bring that up as it's sitting there retrograde, like waiting for the gravedigger to get rid of the dirt that we don't want to walk on anymore. And acceptance. That's what I'm gonna leave it at. This is a big week of acceptance, and accepting that spark coming in, and resting for yourself is needed. I know some people always preach like go hard, go fast, this, that, and the other thing. Like I've done that my whole life, and I'm someone that's designed to learn to slow down, and so I can't preach that from my experience, because I see what happens when I go too hard, too fast in an ego direction. And we need to make sure that our bodies, that our mindset, that we're headstrong enough to handle the big energy of Jupiter coming in. Because if we try to push the boat too fast, like maybe Jupiter gets on the boat and we're still finishing, the final touches on like the construction of the boat, and it's okay, Jupiter's in it, because we'll just push it off with Jupiter in it. God will do that for us. But then like we try to leave the shore too soon, and remembering like, hey, like maybe we needed to put some flowers on the boat. This is the feminine process still leading. Saturn, responsibility for our future and society is number one, but it's like that responsibility to me comes with stewardship of Uranus and Taurus, of the North Node and Sun there, of like the feminine and earth and sustainability. And so it's like, what do we need to sustain us on this, even though it's a brief journey where it's only like for 6 days to like cross to the next place, of like what this new story is going to be, that we can have a sense of if we're paying attention right now to ourselves. But that it's going to be, it can feel like a long, I don't think it necessarily feel like a long 6 days. It's more just like, you don't have to make it such a dry journey because you feel like the story is the only thing of this re-identification that we're all like waiting for, and waiting for the sparks to come back is the only thing that we have to enjoy. And it's remembering that Jupiter does deliver at the end of any zodiac sign, and so it's still delivered a lot at the end of Pisces, even though it may seem like it's never enough, and like that we're always like wanting more, and like wanting it to be more like physical. But it still gave us what we needed to get through the end of the journey. And so therefore Jupiter's going to yield the gifts of anything, of what we need to like go on just this short little journey. So there you guys go. Have a great week. Take care.